we are going to start a very exciting session now. And I know this session is coming with a 15-minute break. So, and many sessions ended a little late, so there will be people trickling in. Yeah, but never mind. We start with inviting the panelists to the dais and having a quick intro. So by the time team, the audience is here, then they will start the session. So can I have the pleasure to invite the panelists to the dais? Mr. Pranay Karuna, who is from Rapid Rise Dasra, as he is the moderator of the session. Abhinav is just reaching. I think his flight was late. He will be having some Pakistan Foundation. Namita Mishra from Foundation for Equality and Security. Narendra Lamaji from CIPRED. Ravi Ranjan, who is additional Principal Chief Editor College from Jharkhand. And Shivani Gupta, who is CEO of Humanity Foundation. Do we have any mic? So, I know your introduction is everything is in the website, but here I would like to say, if you can connect in 2-3 sentences your background with the session. So I think that will be very good to set the context. Like all of you come from different backgrounds, different experience, and other sometimes very rich and very sectoral. So can you just see, like I think all of you now little bit of understanding about community stewardship, community success, profile, and introduction. But to begin with, can you have just quick round of intro, each of you? We can start with Shivani.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to this session between you and lunch. I'm Shivani Gupta. I work with organization called Humanity and management. And to answer Pranav's request, it is essentially we work with women, and we know that women are quite integral to anything which is nature, and also they are probably the best form of community structures which can provide long-term longevity to any initiative taken within the community. And we work a lot on developing local leadership, strengthening Mahila Sangatans, and mandals. So I think that's the connection, is how do we give the ownership of governance and stewardship to the people it matters most to, which is the local. That's the way.
I think I just add one line to it also from my context. Why Shivani is here. Shivani also, Humanity also a funder. Humanity also fund organizations. And as we discussed, the Stewardship Fund is an aspiration where we look at different kind of funder coming together. And they are funding as a strategic funding. They look at women, and in India they are looking to get a land connection. That's why I think.
Thank you for adding. Me as a fellow and a little bit of a burden.
Good afternoon. I am Ravi Ranjan from 94 batch of Indian Forest Service, and apart from working in the Forest Department, I have had the experience of working in a few other verticals of the state government, like the food and civil supply. There I was instrumental in creating software for end-to-end computerization of public distribution system and implementation of National Food Security Act. That happened when I was there. After I got transferred to skill development, I was in charge of the skill development in Jharkhand, and we created previous infrastructure, and to our credit, those did the book of records also, where we distributed 25,000 jobs in the private sector in India. From there, I got into rural development. So I was looking after the urban mission, part of Mandega also. And I was director of state institute of area development. So study of training, community participation, these things happen. Presently, I am looking after CAMPA. So those who do not know about forest department, so CAMPA is an act where the funds which are received in lieu of transfer of forest land for non-foresty purposes like mining, industries, so how to use that fund, and a separate act is there to how to make rules for the use of the fund. So I look after that fund, and it has separate verticals like compulsory afforestation, the net present value, the catchment area treatment plan. So presently I am looking after that, and in all my postings I have had plenty of interaction with communities of various states. So I think I am at the right place at the right time, and I have been following ILDC for a long time, and I am joining it for the first time, and it's my pleasure to address you all on this very important topic. Thank you.
Thanks, Ravi. And another reason why Ravi is here is also, apart from a good friend and well-wisher of IITC, because CAMPA is the biggest restoration fund in India, and CAMPA is transforming the landscapes. So, and he is also now in charge of the climate change cell of Government of Jharkhand, which is looking at different initiatives, including one, I think, COP, this was conference of panchayats, and that they look at climate change. So I think that connection is also
To add to it, climate, I completely forgot the climate change part. So climate change, we ran pilot on adaptation fund. So stewardship fund is quite similar to the adaptation fund, though it is coming from the government. Stewardship is something that comes from the bottom. It was a top-down approach, but still it was very meaningful. So given the chance, I would like to tell you a few things about the adaptation fund. And then climate change, we are running a project by DST, in which we are conducting different kind of climate change studies like projection, vulnerability mapping of different blocks, ozone gas profiling, heat island study. Then the second part is the community participation, training and capacity building. So we have a target to reach out to at least 25,000 people in the next 5 years. Out of that, we have touched around 2,500 people, teaching them on different aspects of climate change, how do they adapt to it, and how do they contribute in small measures towards the mitigation of climate change. So these are the things which are doing.
Thank you. I am Narendra Rana, working as a coordinator for Indigenous People Research and Development Center of Province, Secret in Nepal. Basically, Secret is working for research, education and development in the field of basically indigenous people. The main aim is to promote, protect the indigenous knowledge, cultural value, tradition of indigenous people, to sustain their traditional livelihood through the better recognition, level recognition of customary practices, their cultural and their values, and for the self-governance also. So, in this context, my presentation will be focused on customary governance in Nepal and indigenous stewardship. The cases of Nepal, basically 3 ecological zone of Nepal that covers the high mountain regions, even the median area, even the lowland variety regions. So this is very important issue, and Nepal is gaining momentum with regards to the customary governance within the indigenous community that greatly contribute to the issues of sustainable management of biodiversity, mitigation of climate change, and sustaining the livelihood as per international framework. Thank you.
Thank you. Myself Namita, and I represent Foundation for Ecological Community. We basically identify ourselves as a practitioner and work for commons, community and community. We understand that without coalition, collaboration, it's really difficult to make the management of resources, natural resources particularly, within the control of community. So if we want to, secure common, it is important to, it should be a kind of a community control governed by the community, by the customary law. They have demonstrated and they have the knowledge and they have the capacity also to conserve, and they're conserving it since long. So it's right time to be more vocal about the stewardship, and FES recently have, Landstate and other organizations have proposed a motion in IUCN which is passed also. So we would like to discuss more about that also. And I'm here with Chetan Agrawal ji here, and we thought that he will also share his studying on PS system in Meghalaya. So I would request moderator to if we can learn something from Dr. Agrawal's study also. Thank you.
I'm from Dasra. My name is Pranay, and Dasra is a statistical effort organization in short bringing multiple partners together for a collective action. And over the past 25 years, we've managed to kind of build some of these alliances and coalitions. Climate Rise Alliance is one such efforts. With the support of 70 odd organizations, we're trying to work in the space of mapping India's climate journey. Look forward.
Thank you. I am Abhinav, and I work with Axis Bank Foundation, and I presently lead the program, portfolio of around 60 plus projects across India. The reason why I think I am in this panel is because my area of interest is around payment for ecosystem services, landscape approaches, building multi-partner or multi-stakeholder coalitions, which I have done in my previous roles, primarily in Central India. So I'm quite looking forward to the discussion and really contributing to this initiative of community stewardship funds. And thank you for having me here.
Thanks, Avinav.
I was just in time.
And to get you here also we started the intro and to get the audience as well. Now both of them here, so we'll start the presentation. So thank you very much all the panelists, and thank you the audience for joining this exciting session where we'll be taking a journey towards learning more about community and trying to see how we work with community and support the communities. So, as you see, the panel is a little bit designed panel. We have government here, we have funders here, we have NGO here, and we have people who are ecosystem builders here. And also some grassroots connection that is coming with CIPA. So we'll be talking about something which is at this moment very futuristic idea, very ambitious idea, and there is no such precedence in India. Globally also these things are being thought of, but nevertheless it is not ready to begin things. So, and IIT is a good platform to take it forward, and we have already some leverage as Namita was talking about this IUCN motion. So the way I just back to 7 minutes, set the context that we have. So, thing is that why there is a need of now shifting towards community, particularly indigenous people and local community required, which is used mostly in the climate change parlance, mostly in the context of conference and parties, COP, both in biodiversity, COP, climate change, COP, and also land regulation. Then, what is the stewardship we are talking about? And what is stewardship fund? And a little bit about the IUCN question. And we also started this conversation with the second conversation in a way which is going beyond our design groups of APS, Randstad, C4, FTDPT and others to the community. The first one is in northeast region of India in Dimapur, and many of some of the Akira is here who was part of that, and Nain is here who was part of that conversation. So this is we also got some feedback from them. Just listen. So this whole the model so far, which so many of us who are studying science of forestry or participating in the forest management, is that there should be a scientific forestry approach, a state managed forestry approach, and to some extent a joint forest management approach based on mostly timber and NTFPs, mostly trees, mostly plantations, mostly nursery raised plantations. So somehow this approach we have spent billions of dollars around in India or part of the world. Why this approach has really worked in some context, maybe generating pulpwood, maybe generating timber, maybe meeting our plywood needs, maybe increasing forest cover, but it has not worked so effectively when you're talking about biodiversity, ecosystem services and livelihood. So then the question remains, what could be working? So in that context, when you go to indigenous communities, which we see particularly Glasgow COP, which was a watershed event, where there was a recognition by the global communities that indigenous, wherever there is indigenous local communities, both in upland, forested lands, in case of India, it is Central Indian tribal belt, Northeast India, Western Ghats, Western Himalayas. In those regions, wherever this indigenous people, local community live, there is more biodiversity. There is more terrestrial carbon. So the data sets say almost 80% of the biodiversity and almost more than 25% terrestrial carbon are lying in these areas. And where these people may or may not be owning those lands. So the ownership right may not be there. There may be some kind of, I would correct myself, other ownership right may not be there. They may be owning it customarily, they may be owning it informally, but that is not. And in India also we see where rest of it, total India we have around 22% forest cover. Rest of India forest cover is much less because Northeast India itself is 70%. And this is despite the blame that communities are engaged in shifting cultivation year after year and they are degrading the forest. But why is it so that despite shifting cultivation year after year, Northeast India still boasts more than 70% of the forest cover, and while a lot of plantations, a lot of conservation is important in the rest of India and we don't have so much of forest cover. So this is and at the same time, while there is a commitment, this is bridging slide to the next stewardship slide. While there is a commitment towards moving funding towards IPLC, like if you look at the COP, Glasgow COP, there was a commitment that $1.8 billion will be given to the community. And then Ford Foundation did an audit, I think last year. I think only last year you could achieve it, which was achieved long back. And now I think this new Brazil COP also we are seeing a bigger commitment coming in, a lot of hectareal funding getting created forest and taken from a lot of people coming together and trying to commit money. Bezos App Fund is also, which is Jeff Bezos, Amazon, who is putting in money in the Bezos App Fund to also support this kind of ideas. So now, while this much money is coming, so is it really reaching? Is it really helping the communities to do the way they do? So what is happening? Two things are happening. Most of the time the money is coming in a channel, and the channel is trickling down money to the Indian citizens. So it is not really coming to them. So a lot of money, like we consultants, we researchers, we know institutions, we spend a lot of money and the money go to them is very less. So that is one. Second is when money go to them, it goes again with a copybook agenda. So I have been part of JICA project, Design for Many project. So, and I have seen how we promote a certain kind of directive that this is the way we should manage forest. So many times, while we recognize that the way communities manage forest is better, but we have not been able to provide for them. So in that context, what we are trying to talk about is that one approach we call community stewardship, borrowed from English and others work, which now tell that why there is more biodiversity, why there is more carbon in when IPLC stay, it is because not only because of the agency of rights of the whole land, it is also because of traditional intrinsic knowledge, also because of ethics of care. So people, Vaishnavi community protect black buck, not because they own it, because they care for them. with the culture respect there. So there are optimum number of examples why communities and especially many cases women, many cases religious communities protect and conserve nature because of that. But at the same time they just protect and care, and that is how the species survive. They also know why and how the species survive, what kind of symbiotic relationship they can with the trees. For blackbird caging is equal. So they protect caging. So that is a kind of a symbiotic relationship of trees, of climate. So they manage that, and we was completely surprised when we started this study and started asking questions to Adivasis in central India and also northeast indigenous communities. Their knowledge, like I was telling yesterday in Mon, Coniacs, the way they love and pollard the trees during shifting cultivation can make any European horticulturist doing topiary envy them. Brilliant way they do the things. They know where to cut, how to cut, the angle of cutting, the season of cutting, which tree to cut, so that topics will come. Which unfortunately in science of forest we are not studying. So this is the three things, the element of care, the intrinsic knowledge. So many times our design of forestry schemes don't respect that. We design and sometimes we get result, sometimes we don't get it. So we keeping that in mind, we are thinking, can we pass on those funds which are designated for afforestation, forest conservation, forest restoration through a mechanism which allows communities to regenerate, manage the forest on their own. How it can be, we don't have any idea. We are struggling about that. But we think that could be a blended fund. We think that could be a fund where maximum money should go. We also need some fund to generate more fund, manage some fund, bring in capacity building. So that could be some money which will be a part. They are just figuring something around 20%, but that can be agreed upon. But that was also discussed with Northeast, and it was agreed that we need some kind of fund for capacity building, awareness, as a bigger funding, and some funding for the spreading. And this objective will be supporting community-led conservation, strengthen local livelihood, food security. See, one thing is also that forest is for food security. It has never come to the discourse of food security, food system discourse in India, at least so far. While in Northeast India, in the areas of Pradhan and AFS work with the indigenous community or tribal community, central India, very much 40% of food during the off-season is coming from the forest. A lot of people have mapped and living far. A lot of NGOs have tried to map and those kind of things, like how the forest food is nutritious, provide. So how we bring in that fund to promote forest food and livelihood, and how at the same time that fund protect the cultural rights and identity. Because for example, in Northeast India, every village has a institution, village council, government, and these institutions, traditional or planted or supported government, they have their own norms and rules of landscape restoration, and which has helped them maintain those things for long. So can we connect that to and take it forward instead of replacing it? So this IUCN notion, this is a big, I would say, capitalistic activity that has really going to provide a bigger momentum for this work. So we had proposed something with the AFS was ready and it was proposed that can IUCN approve a motion around stewardship fund mechanism. And fortunately it was it has been, I think, big achievement where majority of the IUCN member states or the members, they supported that. It was voted in the assembly, in the Congress in Abu Dhabi, and it has got enough support. So now it will be part of the IUCN group. So now the IUCN will recommend to states, corporates, everybody who are IUCN members to take this So that will be particularly maybe JICA, who is the biggest donor to Indian policy. JICA can think, okay, some part of money to begin with will be put into a stewardship fund. So I read with this slide, which is talking about when you share this with Northeast communities, and some of them are media, I think also request them with the post of conversation to RBA and to their perspective. So one point was that whenever we focus, so there's a big debate going on. There's a big debate going on, is finance a solution to climate? Because sometimes overemphasizing finance is also a big issue, because finance also brings its own anomalies and challenges. But so that's why Northeast community would okay, but prioritize that finance or not, community well-being and climate adaptation should be the bigger thing. Strengthen the institution, and while talking about the institution, don't replace the institution. We have been very good at crafting new institutions, be it watershed committee, joint forest management committee, be it health sanitation committees, education. We bring in a lot of new committees. So, but there are many local individual like village level institutions. Can we, like Northeast particularly, they have very good institutions. Can we support them? And can we have a gap fund to build awareness and capacity building? The way now carbon market and PS market in Northeast, there is no time to think about fund. First, we have to educate them to tell that no, they take free and prior informed consent. Women and youth should be given more focus in that funding mechanism. And while look at funding, given the Northeast conflict, so peace and conflict sensitivity should be coming in, and a common strategy has to be built around that, and always being a multi-stakeholder platform. I stop here and I will hand over to Pranay to begin.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes.
Naveen and Mandeep, please do keep us on time. Show us that we are exceeding our time. So relying on you. Thank you so much. I think I try and do justice to the context setting that Pranay just done. And I have luminaries on the dais who've been engaged and working with this time. Let me start with the ones who joined us late. Putting you on a spot to begin with, I think in your introduction you did mention about your prior experience of working with ecosystem. Also, livelihood and restoration initiatives and landscape. If we were to kind of understand and learn about what are the key design elements we should account for when we are thinking of community stewardship fund, that would make this a very long-term, flexible, helping with the regenerative agriculture at the same time, the community-led resource management. What some of the suggestions you would have that we should account as a part of our design itself?
Yeah.
I think we should complete this problem.
Yeah, so a lot of things in that question, so I try to break it down. I think the key tenet to having a fund like that I would just categorize it into three buckets. One, having a very compelling and coherent narrative that a fund like this should carry. I'll break this down a little more. The second, that this fund should be investable and to be backed by a very simple attribution framework. That's the second point. And third is that there needs to be obviously a very collaborative and coherent and sort of what we now increasingly speak of a landscape approach to taking or designing this fund. Obviously, like the architecture and all of that needs to be further broken down, but I'll focus on these three. So now, starting with the first, which is the a narrative, what we say. So like a fund has to be funded by something. Like the present funds that we have are primarily like what we have, like models like PES, for example, in Meghalaya, that we support FES there as well. So it's the government that's funding, or there is some funding coming from World Bank, KFW, right? I think there is an increasing need to look at businesses funding, and by businesses I don't mean philanthropic or CSR. I mean the business that are, let's say for example, procuring agriculture produce from those landscapes, procuring commodities, like for example Northeast you have increasingly palm coming up as a big commodity. So how are we sort of able to create narratives that take all these stakeholders together, yet they are investable and can be funded. So that's why compelling narrative is important, and I feel like whatever little work that I have done, that unfortunately biodiversity, land, agriculture or carbon does not hold that compelling narrative for all stakeholders. I think water is something that really, hits the, nerve, or what should I say, like it aligns with everybody and each stakeholder. Like we need water for everything, right? And I feel water is or can be that compelling or coherent narrative that binds such funds together. And I think we are barking the wrong tree most of the times when we are excessively focusing on carbon. I think there needs to be very, a shift in from that perspective. I think we're just following what the international sort of, narrative is coming, and we are just, just trying to align ourselves with that. I think that's, so I'll stop there. Maybe we can dwell into this a little more deeper. The second point I said was of, I think, working on having this landscape approach or collaborative approaches. So now, Community Stewardship Fund, I understand that it is focused on areas where IPLCs are conserving their land, right? So I feel that while this can work in, smaller sort of sections, because I think there is not enough homogeneity. So for me, landscapes would be like sub-river basins. So in a sub-river basin, there would be many constituencies when it comes to land, not just IPLCs that are conserving, right? So there needs to be a sort of, when we talk of the architecture of the fund, some sort of a convener or a landscape convener, let's say, which is working at a sub-river basin level, right? Or maybe at a river basin level for all levels, right? I think within that, then you have demarcated conserved areas that are being administered and conserved or governed by IPs. So I think there is a need to also recognize that it cannot be just an IPLC centric funding mechanism. It needs to also look at the other constituents in that, landowners in that landscape. I think that's very critical. Within this, why am I saying this is because this needs to have a policy backing, right? So that jurisdictional layer in this needs to be embedded from the beginning. If it is not there, then it will not be long term what you were saying. It will just be another, something for next 5-10 years that you get some donors or some private sector supporting you. So for a continuum, you need to have a jurisdictional or a policy backing to this fund. So I think that can only be achieved if you have like a helicopter approach to, or like a river basin approach to designing such funds. I think that's my second point. And the third is having a simple attribution framework. I think the most where I think we are falling is because projects are not investable. So for example, only if you look at, if 100 rupees is invested on nature finance, only around 13 to 14% is contributed by private sector. There is a UNEP report on this in 2020 that came out. It says that only 30 to 14% of that 100 rupees is contributed by them, but they are also the largest extractor of resources from the land. So there needs to be investable projects for them. There needs to be projects that can be attributed, and that's why I feel that water is something. There are enough examples across, like I used to work with the Nature Conservancy, and they implemented water funds in several regions, in South Africa, in South America, in US. And water is the commodity or ecosystem service that has provided that attribution framework to them. So I think these three, if we are focusing on these three, I feel it can be, a fund like that can be envisioned. And since you already know that this is not being tried elsewhere, I think if we factor in these three things, that in my view, I think can be a good way forward.
Thanks so much. I think a very important point of not overemphasizing carbon, looking at the policy or very sustainable institutionalized efforts. Again, water is something that should not be missing out on. So thank you. I'll come back to you with more questions later. I'd like to move to Shivani ji. I think often what we are thinking is that gender is a very aftermath, an afterthought. Let's incorporate this also. And this has been the case, not only this space, in gender. So having worked in this space on commons or also on gender, if I were to ask you a question specifically on the Community Stewardship Fund, what within that we should intentionally do so that we are recognizing or creating space for indigenous or marginalized women who are considered rightful owners or decision makers on the commons, on the efforts of the conservation itself. What are the thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
So, so I think there are a couple of very discrete pieces that you could probably look at it from a gender lens. And we work with women we kind of look at multiple marginalized women who are facing multiple levels of marginalization, caste, class, access to resources, etc. So one thing specifically from indigenous communities and tribals is we always fall back on customary laws a lot in that context, right? And a lot of them are not gender responsive, gender sensitive. So how does that fit in, right? How do we then challenge it to some level and get with it? Because they are patriarchal, right? Who created them, right? So I'm not going to go down that path and more than myself. But I think it's also about challenging the community structures that we are looking at, because they also are part of the same system. Right? Why did SHGs take off big in India? Somebody probably needs to do, because it was the only space where people could come and be themselves and get access to it. So I'm not saying SHGs is the answer, because it comes with its own set of challenges and stuff like that. But how do you then look at existing community structures that I have mentioned and engender them very consciously and deliberately? And that gets me to the kind of the second point. Because when you go to the communities, and I'm sure Namita will have lots and lots of information, is when you sit down with a community and you look at who is holding the knowledge for this stewardship, right? And do a simple game that a team of men tells you what are the things you find in the bill, what is in a team of women. I think typically it's a 1:4 ratio. If women are writing 4 things, men are writing 1. And if you do an analysis, it's commercial versus what's used for food, what's used for medicine, etc. etc. So if we agree, if we are saying that whoever is the tiller gets the governance, then should it not be the same for commons as well? It's the, it's a more logic-based thing that I think the third thing which Pranav kind of mentioned is food security. It comes down to simple things. Women are the caretakers, not only of the family but also of the forest and all. So they know exactly how much mushroom should they cultivate, so that next year there is enough for the family. And they look at it as a community resource, right? ये नहीं कि 4 लोग जाएंगे तो somebody will take more and somebody will take. So they are more conscious about it as well. And I think last thing I would say from a fund perspective that you need to look at it from gender is make it simple. Don't make it like carbon. And I'm not beating up carbon, which nobody understands except the middlemen. Right? The markets don't understand, they are just getting carbon credit or वो उसके लिए 100 रुपए दे रहे हैं. Right? Community doesn't understand, they certainly, in my view, don't benefit from it also in a large way. So make it simple so that people in the community can steward it in long term. the middlemen, the NGOs, the funders. Hopefully, the government has to get out of that system in 5 years' time. So, if or 10 years, whatever, X amount of time, right? So, if I was to make a for example, people who have a skill, people community have a skill, people who are extracting have a skill, of course. So, they need to have an ecosystem that we can manage where you don't need, FPOs and chartered accountants and funders and all. So, that would be my view from a national lens. Lots more to talk about, but
Thanks so much for actually bringing in the whole lens of who's holding that knowledge and how much knowledge that has been kind of withheld, and not having them definitely would be a loss of not having those information and knowledge for sure. So thank you for highlighting that part. Like to move to Ravi sir and ask questions around if we were to look at from the perspective of public forest management, how these community stewardship fund can actually also align with the priorities of the state while positioning, let's say, community institute as a key trusted partner rather than just being a beneficiary in it.
We have a system of JFMCs, Joint Forest Management Committees, and lately they have been motivated and channelized quite a lot. Earlier it was not so. In fact, there is a resolution by the government that all the payments to the workers should go directly to their bank account. And the FMCs are involved in right from the stage of selection of site to the selection of species and finally executing them. So JFMC is one such tool which we can leverage for our own advantage. And the problem with the state like Jharkhand or many other states in the eastern part, we can't compare to Northeast, which is far more educated. And they have many sui generis community leadership examples, which are far and few in between states like Jharkhand or Odisha. That is. So one reason is education, one is lack of awareness. So we need to reach the community with the right kind of tool. And then I slightly disagree with my co-panelists. Let's not demonize carbon. It's a very strong focal point to start with. Whatever we do, either creates positive carbon footprint or a negative carbon. So we can't dish it away. It is there, it has to stay there, and we can't just close our eyes on the dominant discourse in the, which is happening in the world stage. Carbon is a one big focal point, and we need to recognize it and leverage it. So, a few years back, the government of India came up with the National Adaptation Fund for Climate Change. It was a pilot study, and it was expected that all the states will take it up and then start their own kind of thing. And we chose two separate landscapes. One is the one landscape which was most vulnerable to climate change as per the DST report, and one was the least vulnerable. So we want to see the effect of our intervention in those areas, and whatever the forest department may say that we are saving forest, but nothing can happen without the active support of communities. So whatever forest we have been able to save is because of the communities, and that's what was our starting point also. So we reached to the communities, and our first target was to make them aware of the perils of the climate change and how best they can adopt it, because three most important fallouts of climate change are drought, flood, and extreme heat. And those in the rural communities are going to face the major brunt of it. So let's make them aware. So we had five-pronged strategy. First was training and capacity building, and the most important, as Abhinav said, water. So most important part of the fund went towards soil and moisture conservation. Small, cost-effective structures like drum check dams and earthen check dams, which can sustain for a long time. Then gender-sensitive livelihood, backyard farming, poultry, and these kinds of things. Climate-sensitive agriculture, use of Jivamrit, Amrit Jal, Amrit Mitti, these kinds of things. And then energy, substitution of energy like gobar gas and improved cook stoves, and effective use of small wood. Some small treatment to the gullies. What happens that the villagers change their poles in their huts every 3 years. But with a small intervention of treating it with black jamal, that lifespan can increase up to 10 years. So we went with these interventions, and next 5-6 years we were able to do something meaningful in 10 out of 17 SDGs. So that's one thing, and based on the success of that experiment, the state government is also thinking of starting its own adaptation plan. So mitigation is something is going to take a lot of time, and people are not really concerned with mitigation. But adaptation is something we should focus on, because that's the thing which is going to affect our people, our local community. So adaptation, the state level adaptation fund is one such thing which we are thinking of. Right now, for the state plan fund and CAMPA funds also, two major aspects are fire protection. People do it on their own, whether we support them or not. So we are selecting some good GFMCs and then supporting them, transferring the money directly to their accounts, and then they are doing their fire activities for the 4 months of fire seasons. And one important thing is human-wildlife conflict. So that's where people facing the most hardship, those who are living in the fringe of forest area. And elephant is the most, an animal that damages the most. We don't have much of real guy problem. So what happens that elephant moves from one patch of forest to the next one. And there's huge revenue area, village area, habitation in between. And the corridors have been broken. Maybe natural process, but most of it has been because of development, doubling of or tripling of railway lines, 4 laning or 6 laning of highways, and then plenty of open cast mining. The Jharkhand is blessed to have plenty of minerals. We have been supporting country's development for a long time and will continue to do so. But our communities have suffered ecologically on account of that. And one major fallout has been the diversion of elephant migration routes. So one idea is to patch up the open areas in between two forest patches. And it's people who are coming forward with that. They are giving their land for plantation of bamboo and other species of which are palatable to elephant. And then we are taking up plantation on rarity land also. Campa is this elephant corridors is the only thing which is permitted outside forest area under Campa. So we are taking advantage of Campa funds in creating green belts joining 2 separate forest patches, and we have been able to get a bit of success because people are reluctant. They'll say that no, once we create forest in between, no one else will come, and then they'll raid out, which they are doing already. So it's taking time to get them understand, but once they get a hang of it, then they are coming forward with their own offerings. So this is how the forest department is trying to support the communities and get their support. Our goal is the same. Our goal is protection of forest and biodiversity, and let's not romanticize the local communities too much, and let's not demonize the forest or the state government part of it. Both have their own weaknesses. The communities, the kind of commitment which they had in the past, 3 generations ago, is not the same anymore. So there are many reasons. People are getting exposed to social media. They want development, and then there are many other things. So they are not so much enamored with protecting their biodiversity or their heritage as much as their ancestors were. So that's where the state should also come into picture. Civil societies like ATS and other organizations, they are doing good work, and it's our duty to fill up the gap. And then we can think of something like community stewardship fund. Right now, there is very little capacity among the communities to get the fund and then use it judiciously. There is a huge gap which exists. That's where organizations like civil society organizations and then government, they can come together and work with the community. Thank you.
Thank you. I think very catchy line or a key point is that the goals are shared, the government and the community. So thank you for bringing that up. Thanks for talking about CAMPA, JMFC, all of these initiatives that would involve community in the process. So, and also point taken on not demonizing carbon, but finding a right balance of how we kind of discuss when we do talk about carbon in general. So moving to our next panelist, Narendraji, I do have a question, and it's coming from a very learning lens. I'm borrowing some learning from Nepal. So the whole efforts in the community-led fund, how can we embed the whole aspect of indigenous governance system or the cultural stewardship in the whole fund implementation and monitoring area, so that it becomes more inclusive, that becomes more community-led? What are some of the learnings that you will have from Nepal?
Thank you for questions. Well, I will try my best to answer. And fortunately, we have a executive director from my organization, Dr. Asif Sharma, is here. And once on-cover answer will be hopefully given by Dr. Asif. So, very critical questions. Before I joined SHIPREC, Center for Indigenous Research and Development, I worked for the conservation area in Nepal around 3 decades, nearly 27 years. And my lesson from the state-run conservation area, protected area management system is that it made it focus on wildlife, wilderness, rather than welfare and interconnectedness of indigenous people with the forest and natural resources. So this is one of the most lacking part. That's why the Center for Indigenous People Research, SHIPREC is doing a bit more focus on right-based conservation and customary governance practices for the sustainable resource management in Nepal. With respect to the community stewardship fund, at the very beginning, the customary governance system in Nepal is really a time-tested practice, very traditional, very ancestral, age-old practice. At the very initial stage, where there was a less intervention of the government entire time, they managed themselves through the local contribution, through the local donations, through the local participation. They manage their forest, they manage their biodiversity, they manage the indigenous people manage the river system. All this in a more sustainable way. But the profound lacking of the funds, as well as no consistency in funding, we have seen that some of the customary practices needs a revival, and some of the customary practices is distorted by the government policy also. So in our experience, the SHIPREC, one of the example I would like to say, if time allows, we'll show the one short movie also about that. In the mountain area, Shakta conservation, customary conservation practices, more than 100 years old practice. And that, interestingly, under the jurisdiction of protected area management system of Nepal, that is the Manaslu conservation area regions, separate with the help of basically with the local government, we've been able to recognize the customary practices. So in our learning, if the customary practices related to their culture, our culture, rituals and interconnectedness with the forest and biodiversity, land and territory, and this gives a very nice way for funding also, because it paved the way for funding by the donor and even the government, local government also. So this is the very effective way to recognize the indigenous customary governance systems. We have been able to do the local recognition in some of the prominent customary governance in Nepal also. even in lowland and even in high mountain areas also. So while we doing the customary, actually community stewardship fund, we should approach the customary governance. We should analyze and review how the system is working. We critically should make a bottom-up approach rather than government policy. The bottom-up approach on the basis of real demand from their cultural perspective, from their spiritual perspective, from their customary governance structure. This is highly needed for the proper utilization of fund and all these things. So this is my answer. I think I would like to request any further uncovered answer from the class later. Okay.
Thank you so much. I think very important you said the time testing nature of these indigenous governance systems and the practices, how it has to be bottom up in nature. We'll come to you for more insights and more learning from Nepal for sure. Now moving towards Namita, I have a question on the multi-stakeholder collaboration across civil society, government, private philanthropists, the solution providers, or the corporate side of it. What they could contribute to further strengthen the design and implementation of community-led fund. And do we have any examples of such innovative models that we can think of, that would add to the scalability of this?
I have an opportunity to talk about after listening from the government, community representation. So, as Ravi sir said that dominating discourse is very important. And who is dominating in this, whether it is a funding or it's a kind of a practice thing. So government is a major stakeholder in that. They set the tone of the where should be funding go and how should be the approach. So the major expectation, as personally, I believe in operation also. So we have to influence how the government think about and where they are investing. So if we see that existing narrative in different schemes and different approaches, still we talk about JFMC, we talk about many participatory schemes. But if we see what is the underlying understanding in those schemes, we always find, Pranav said that there is 70% forest in NE and they have their traditional and customary practice. We in Chhattisgarh have 44% forest and they have a tribal 33%. And that is, we understand that because of the community, the forest is conserved. But still, we feel the existing narrative is community can't conserve. Communities are beneficiaries. So these are the dominating discourse that in that context we have to think about coalition and collaboration. How the collaborations and coalitions can shift these narratives. So I think this is the one example of the coalition collaboration where everyone is here. We representing the CSOs are here, government is here. So there's a lots of kind of collaborations are required which create evidences in support of the community stewardship. They can more vocal about support, appreciate the things. And then I think we ultimately have to influence the schemes. Like if we take the NREGA or we take the other schemes of the government, it's very participatory. They say that the demand should come from the community. So whether it is actually coming, whether it is actually going at that level, so we have to think about what we have to change the mindsets. And second is I would like to discuss about if we say that NGOs and CSOs also talk about, first activity we talk about the trainings in awareness creation. So it gives the idea that we understand that community have little knowledge and lack of knowledge, and they have. So it's totally against what we are talking about as a community stewardship. Mr. Ravi said that we need to build the capacity of the community, but where we want to put the fund. I mean, we have to build their agency rather than thinking that they haven't knowledge or they haven't care about it. So how can we value their care aspect? How can we value their knowledge aspect? How can we work on the knowledge system? So these are the few things that we need a kind of more thinking about when we are talking about any position in collaboration. There are many examples, like in Maharashtra we have CFR under FRA there is a conservation committee where the government directly talk with the Gram Sabha representative. It's a good example to have an interface and give a kind of idea. Similarly, in other like federations we is talking about how the federation can be come forward and talk about their customary practice work. In Meghalaya and in Northeast, there the PS system is there. They recognize the thing that if they can give an untied fund to the community can conserve. So those federations should be promoted in that space. So whether we are in implementation space or in the policy space, there is a lot of talking to each other, and especially we have to create evidence and talk more about the support of the community stewardship, and we should adopt it as a value rather than a kind of just a kind of a programmatic approach. If we can it's a preamble kind of thing. Let's have a preamble that we all adopt it, and all the program policy should have a integral part that and if that will happen, then the funds definitely come, and especially from the government side, it will come from the government side. That is.
Thank you so much. I think very interestingly you did call out the importance of what is the dominant narrative, whose voices have been sticking out, what are the voices that have been considered. At the same time, you did mention about the care, the knowledge that the community hold, and how policymakers, policy implementers, and the community through dialoguing can come up with this Maharashtra example that you brought to the table. So thanks for highlighting that. I'll move to Pranabda now and what you can. Ask this question is that how the fund helps strengthen the land rights so the community can fully participate in the conservation finance. At the same time, beyond this funding, what are the roles that the community can play and not restricting only from the funding lens to it?
I think I'm audible now. Sorry, sir. So I was trying to see like the kind of directives coming in here is pretty, it is there. So now if you want to go beyond, like for example, what are the evidences and basis around that? For Kerala, Nepal has a strong evidence of community forest user groups, and global studies indicate that community cover forest, the forest covered biodiversity. I think there was 2 years back, Washington Post article was completely so here also we are discussing that. But I think one of the next shift towards that evidence would be trying to look at what is happening in agriculture. I come from agriculture science background. So we all thought green revolution technology is the best. And we started with these machines, genetics and chemical. And we moved down, try to improve production, and we achieved a lot of things. But we also achieved a lot of soil pollution, health erosion issues, and now same government is talking about agroecology. Now the agroecological revolution is coming up. Millets which were long forgotten are coming back. I think while all of us agree that fund is required for afforestation, reforestation, for landscape, funds are coming from donors, government, everywhere. The question here is that, and everywhere community is there. combatant community collaborating different way. Maybe somebody is setting narrative, somebody is dominant, but they are working together. But now, one thing is how the fund will be spent. We can think about power relations, we can think about things that can continue. But now, the bigger question is not about just changing power relation. It is changing even if you do joint forest management. Are you going to decide a nursery plantation, or is going to wildlings, or you are going to go for tending operation, or if you are going to go for fire management, whether it will be fire line or cultural burning. Because the things which we have started doing in forestry, scientific forestry, either there is not much impact assessment, or when there is impact assessment, we don't find much impact. Whereas in case of communities, there are evidence. It is not, we can say it's purely based on community. We also can't say because everywhere combatant communities are interacting in Indian forest ecosystem for hundreds of years. Northeast it is less, central and tribal belt is more. In Chhattisgarh, more forest is there, there are 12 because. But question here is that, is there a space for new way of looking at forestry? Can we think about a new way of forestry? And here we talk about the role of community there. So what role is community playing is mostly community is playing a role of co-manager or a laborer or a implementer of project. Can community be also part of decision making? It is there. In JFM it is there. In microplanning we talked about that community will come. But I have been also part of microplanning designing. Whenever you design a microplan template, when it goes to the village, the template become important, the people become less so. So I think this is a challenge. I don't have clear solution because even in stewardship forestry, we have to bring in that change. So agroecology is providing a very good example. I think agroecological transformation where the farmers are leading the way, the same subsistence agriculture more sustainable. So can we draw from that approach to see, can we have a space for more adaptive forestry? Not more adaptive, community is trying to adapt to forestry that way. Than a scientific forestry which is more towards timber and revenue and maybe better, it has its own way of merits. But we change, in the context of climate change, the merits and the goalposts have shifted. Like you are talking about attribution and things. So the goalposts have shifted. Now goalpost is ecosystem services, biodiversity and water. So do we need to change forest management? So in that, do we have numbers? Do we have capacity? And in that case, can community help? Right? That is the question we should ask.
Yeah, we'll open to the Q&A. I'm just kind of going to do a quick rapid fire before I open up to the Q&A. And we can go in the same order. Pranada, starting from you now, is that quick two things. One, a success. What is one thing that comes to mind when it is important for us as a part of like making this a success for a community? And what can go wrong? A very quick one sentence. What is needed to make it a success? And what can go wrong?
One success is believing in community, that community can do. But what can go wrong is the elite capture.
Same question. Rapid fire same question. One success and one what could go wrong?
I think one would be that investing in conveners that have a systems lens, that approach landscapes with a systems lens. What is going wrong presently is that we've been seeing this, like everybody's acting in silos, and that's the reason why I emphasize on having landscape conveners. And it's on the onus, like the onus lies on, in my view, both the civil society and CSR and philanthropy to invest in landscape conveners. Don't invest in things that are being done by the government, which we tend to do. I think we need to clearly articulate priorities and invest in these systems rather than just saying no, we invest in pilots and it's on the government to scale it. That's not the approach I think we like donors or CSR should be looking at.
Thanks. Same question. One success and what could go wrong?
So I think from a success perspective, one could think of what are each stakeholders getting to the table and get the best out of it. Instead of saying scientific forestry is bad and traditional knowledge is very good and government is good, everybody gets something to the table. So how do you get the best out of the mix is an art form that we need to kind of optimize on. And what could go wrong is the community is worse off than it is today. I think that would be like the worst case scenario in my mind.
Thank you. Same question again. One success and what would be
My answer would be similar. So there has been some amount of trust which is building up between government, communities and the CSOs. And my fear is that if trust is broken someday, then all will go haywire.
Trust is important. Same question. One on stewardship fund.
Yeah.
Really success.
Yeah.
What is that one success and one thing that you think could go wrong?
Wow, this is very good questions. In my mind and my experience, as far as I know, basically resource documentation, sensitization is the backbone for the community stewardship. This should be done before the funding generalizes. And the funding should be a direct, not indirect, not so many years of level that hurdles the community, and the community doesn't know what is coming and what is going. So this is, and one of the major part is that there should be a community ownership. They feel their ownership. They should live for the fund. They should do something for the fund. They should be engaged in that. Otherwise, the community fund will be not properly utilized. And in our experience, in our secrets, the organization's experience, we have engaged very long time to keep a legal recognition of indigenous-led customary governance. So for that, the funding should be done on sensitization first, research, documentation, how to formulate policy, guidelines, act. We need to consult different lawyers in order to make the act regulation in line with the customary governance structure. So these are the vital things, vital component for the proper utilization of community stewardship fund. Where the fund goes, how the fund comes, how and what is coming. So this needs a very, very vital part of the study and information. And that's why we became a bit successful in sector customary governance in high mountain areas, Borger and Balmans and Lower Tarai region, where the Haru indigenous community are strongly implementing Borger and Balmans customary practices at the buffer zone of national park. At the same time, there are some customarily managed forest area also in medial areas where we mainly focus on some of the very interesting research tools, that is community-based information monitoring system, CBBs, that really generate very effective, very participatory, very leadership type of study tools that led by the indigenous people. So more focus should be given on indigenous-led research in indigenous community, customary practices also. So this is the vital part. And another is we alone cannot do anything. There need a very integrated, collaborative, and good cooperation, even with the government stakeholder, government agency. We Nepal have three kinds of government after federal system being introduced. That is the local government, and second is provincial government, and the central government, what we call federal government. So we have to cooperate, coordinate, and work with these three types of government in order to implement in order to make effective utilization of community stewardship fund? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Same question, the rapid mode, one success and what to say.
Maybe in words only. So the success factor, I think, remove the beneficiary word, believe in that. So stewardship, and the wrong thing that focusing on carbon only will go wrong. Definitely, we have to be a stewardship based thing.
Thank you so much. Opening our floor for the Q&A, and I see quite a few hands. We could have some volunteers.
We've been talking about community. Are we making the community inclusive of gender, age? That's just put in when we talk about community stewardship. And another thing is when we talk about plantation and we the guardian, but ultimately what happened, the experience that we have is that because of all those tree plantation, the people doesn't have place to do food anymore, so they have to migrate. This should not happen anymore. Because of conservation and because of plantation, people are migrating. This should not happen. So just this.
Thank you.
Just to introduce, my name is Pasimona Silva. I work for Center for Indigenous People Resource and Development with Narendra. Just to add few things that, the last question I just would like to highlight on that part. The success of this one depends on, only we come up with the recognition of the role and contribution of the communities, especially indigenous people, local community, youth, the women. And most of the time we always see like suspicious eyes. Oh, when they do it, we have to do it. This kind of stereotypical notion that we have to help them to do it. We have to disrupt that notion. And that disruption notion comes up, when we start, deconstruct the constructed mindset that only I can do it, not others. And unless and until we disrupt that notion, I think the business as usual model will continue. So that's why it's very, very important that role and contribution, and that is possible through the recognition of customer institution that Narendra already mentioned. And customer institution, many people, because I also teach in the university, I always tell my students that when people say, oh, we want how do you prove that indigenous knowledge contributes for climate action or biodiversity practice or ecological connectivity, and then the connection with the customer institution and governance systems. And there are a lot of multiple layers where knowledge, culture, values, spiritual connection comes up. And that connection is very important to open up ourselves. The IPC, the Intergovernmental Plan on Climate Change and Biodiversity Base, already come up, the role and the contribution of indigenous people and local communities. And I think that needs to be uplifted in the discourse of academic and non-academic. I'll add this one, I know the many hands now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for my name is very cool. My name is Rishikesh Singh. I advise GFW project of the first partner. I just want to thank one of the richest, this was one of the richest, interaction, deliberation I've seen, other than many sessions, but I would like to say this is the best attended. And I just want to repeat what he said. He said, trust the community or trust the community. Then what was the second one? Avoid alien culture. Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely catchy and sort of community. We used to believe in trusting. The community can trust me. I hope you are recording this.
Yes, very good.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank you.
Thank you. There is one hand out. I think most of the people are contributing, but that's a great thing. Having questions. Yes.
So it was just an excellent session. I am having one reflection right now that I want to say that. So when we are talking about community-led conservation, so it is very powerful local process. We need to have that mind that when community have the authority, they can govern it and drive it. So it is very important, whether it is a water body or forest or any type of resource, how to have their authority on that resource, and that is very phenomenal because it shifts their perspective from the user of that resource to the manager of that resource, and that brings huge community mobilization to you can add power and to the conservation process. That's the first one. The second point is from when we are talking about a powerful narrative is important that on what saying. So how to blend the conservation along with ecology and also social transformation. Ecology is already there. So it is very important how we can think about some green livelihoods. Maybe if we are anything in context specific green livelihood can be, and also how to quantify the ecosystem services. That is very important to give a big power to everyone who are in this process. Because otherwise it is becoming this narrative is very important. Many things are happening on ground. How to bring evidence on that and ecosystem services focus. So that will be important in the entire dialogue of creating a power. So I can say this is very good session, and this itself, the community-led conservation can be the biggest climate solution along with economic, social and social contribution.
Fantastic. Thanks. There's one hand up there and then there's one here. Yes.
Thanks. I'm Girija. I find the idea of this fund really exciting. I just have a kind of a concern or bit of skepticism, and it's based on experience. How do we sensitize the leadership of a conservation organization on the issues of DEIJ? Because I say this based on experience. I used to work with a larger conservation organization, and I was leading a grant on DEIJ, internal grant. But our leadership wasn't so keen, so we kind of lost an opportunity. So, and I think this is not so uncommon. So, what can we do to sensitize them on DEIJ related issues?
हेलो मैं दिनेश और गुजरात से हूँ मेरा इस सातवां पार्टिसिपेशन है ILDC बट उन्होंने जैसे बताया इट वाज वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग वेरी शॉर्ट एंड जितने भी सेशन मैंने अभी तक अटेंड किए हैं उसमें मतलब 7 साल में बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग था। तो आप लोगों के लिए बहुत बड़ा क्लैप और जितने भी लोग बोले बहुत अच्छी चीज़ थी क्योंकि सेंटर में कम्युनिटी थी। पहली बात तो ये थी और दूसरा मुझे लग रहा है कि हम लोग कैसे इसमें रीच आउट कर पाए। जैसे बहुत सारी कम्युनिटी बेस्ड ऑर्गेनाइजेशन हाउ दे विल रीच आउट टू यू द पीपल हु आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इट एंड इट इज़ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग एंड ऐसा लग रहा है मुझे कल इसके बारे में और डिस्कशन अगर शाम के टाइम पे या क्लोजिंग टाइम पे इस पर किया जाए तो इट विल मोर पीपल विल एंगेज इन दिस। या थैंक यू। सेम रो
कल भी आया
आप ही लोग हैं
हाँ
ठीक है आपको सुन आ जाएगा
सेशन भी देखिए ना।
I'm Chetan Agarwal. I'm doing a study on the payment for ecosystem services fund, which program is Megara is running now for the third round of funding. There were 2 rounds. So I think there's something to be learned from that. It's the first large-scale trial in India by a government facility. They provide about 50,000 hectares, where they basically make a payment which is there are 3 levels of payment. There's a base for existing forests. Usually the money is spent by government to plant new trees and new forests. Campa is a project, is a kind of offset for loss of forests. But here Meghalaya is recognizing that we have patches of good forests, both in community and private. So there's a 10,000 base payment, and if it's there, it has certain biodiversity attributes or a sacred grove attribute, an additional payment. And if the community wants to register it under a government thing as a community reserve, then they get an additional kind of payment, which is not flying actually. They don't want to do that. But I think we need to be looking at that. And the kind of question to especially Raviji and or something to think about is, if we take the what are the attributes of what a good fund would have, like what you were saying of attribution framework and all, and we look at the two largest fund transfers which are happening in the country. One is the MP Narega, which is employment kind of guarantee program, and the other is Campa funds for offsetting. Can we tweak these two programs or look at them from a fund perspective? What would a stewardship fund looks like, and if there are elements of that we can bring into these two programs, I think the impact would be huge.
I will add two more things to that. The funds you were saying. One is the Kisan Samman Nidhi Yojana. $45 billion, like 4 lakh crore rupees, has been deposited in farmers' account as DBT. It's a no strings attached kind of fund or support that has been given. So just adding कि आप नरेगा बोल रहे थे, आप कैंपा बोल रहे थे, I'll want to add one more to that list. Repurposing that basically.
Especially for Campa, and we look at the green credit program, and can CFRs take up the green credit on their own rather than depending on an offsetting buyer, say ONGC clearing some forest, or they want some forest land and they are in offsetting, they're buying a green credit. Currently, only the government can offer that green credit. So the money still goes to the forest department. So can the communities play a role in offering the same kind of thing? This is something to think about with all the safeguards that we can provide. Maybe the outcome may perhaps be better than the outcome that we are achieving currently.
To answer your first question, Campa comes with its own set of rules, and it does not allow conversions with other programs. Like we do something with state fund and you are lacking in fund, you take it from Campa. It's not allowed. So there needs to be some change at the policy level to make it converse with Manrega activity. And as for green credit program, government has made a completely new guideline in the span of 1 year only. So earlier the PSUs, it was open to PSUs only. Now that private companies can also do plantation with their own fund. Earlier the PSU needed to transfer the fund to the central administrator, which was ICFRE, and from there the funds used to go to the state government, and they used to do the plantation. And the PSUs would get one green credit for one surviving plant after 2 years of time. Now that it has been changed entirely, and now the PSUs will go and do their own practices themselves. They not funds, transfer funds to the state government. So they will use their own funds, create plantation, and then get green credits. At the end of 5 years, they will transfer the area to forest department for its protection. So I don't know where communities will come into picture, because right now it's not open to people, not open to community land. Once Government of India comes up with a new set of guidelines and opens it up to communities where people, PSUs or companies can do their plantations in community lands, which are plenty, then that will make a lot of sense.
How do we not miss out on good projects and what philanthropic competition
Leadership is not available to what we are doing now. So.
I think relate to what Girija said, because I think we worked in the same organization, TNC, I think she's referring to. So, yeah, so that's a huge challenge. I think it's primarily, I think, is on people like us who work on the ground to be able to sensitize that, and it's a challenge, but I think it's some systemic issues there that that cannot just be done away with through sensitization of people who are working on the ground. We have to accept at some level that there is a high level of elitism that still exists in the spaces that we operate in, and unless that is something that we can tackle or navigate, such challenges will always remain. So I think that would be my response to that. I was just a bit confused when there was a lot of discussions around trusting the community and context with which this panel was, like we were discussing, is that it's a community stewardship fund. So community stewardship is the core of what we are discussing, and you know, we basically, like for me, it's a given that if we are designing a community stewardship fund, we all agree to the fact that yes, it cannot be done without trusting or putting the onus on the community. So I am a little this when Namita ji and others were saying ki, you know, we need to trust the community, we need to do this. They तो given है, हम community stewardship fund तभी तो बनाएंगे जब तक हम ये पूरी तरीके से to the, यानी कि जो हमारा we have you know FRA, unless we align with that to the letter and spirit, how will this fund be created? So I am a little this, you know.
It was not about trusting the community per se. There are two things I think. One is, for example, as a donor, you or as the Ravi told us, government. When government design a project, they design it in such a way. Like Kampa cannot be spent in this. Then when you do Kampa can be spent in JICA, it has to be 15,000 per hectare and plantation. Like even with the PS project, Chetan, it is not only this money is untapped, this money is given. You have to do a fag line, you have to do fencing, you have to do region nursing. So, yeah. So that is one is that wherever any money go, you go with the design. Second thing, you also in impact, you are also monitoring indicators, like you are talking about water, or carbon, always. So these two things, we tell them to trust the community, but by doing these two things, we don't trust the community. So that is the point, like how we change that.
If we imagine the stewardship fund as an isolated fund, what is happening with the natural farming right now? We have, the government have launched a natural farming other than the agriculture. So there is hardly any talking about the mainstream agriculture and the natural farming right now. And there's lots of fund is going in the, continue as the agriculture farming, which we criticize in natural farming, and both is going parallel, and there is no impact of natural farming in that level. So the easiest part of making convert the stewardship fund into a scheme is the easiest form, but that will defeat the purpose that what Pranay is saying. We have to change the design of the existing schemes, existing philanthropy programs. We're not saying you make a kind of a special fund for a stewardship. You make the change in the design itself, which is existing. So that's a more difficult part, which Girja is also saying. How can we make the sensitize the existing policy persons, existing fund designers, so make that. So that's I think I'm coming from that.
Just one small advice from my side. Governments take time to change. So right now, all our plantation activity all throughout the country is tree-centric. Unless government gets this feedback, that's not useful to people. They'll not stop doing that. So that feedback needs to come to the government. And do not expect immediate results because governments take time. Because new schemes to be designed, tested, and then implemented.
On that note, thank you so much to the panelists and the audience who contributed to the conversation. One request, same hall, same time tomorrow. We would like to hear more from you and engage on the same topic. So requesting you to participate in a large number tomorrow as well. Thanks everyone. Thank you so much.
Tomorrow's session is about expanding the circle. So it is about coalition. So it is about you.
Thank you.